In today's episode of Voiced, we have a post from r/pro revenge by Called It in the 90s, and it is about a clever lawyer's strategic retaliation against a ruthless commercial landlord. Landlords can often be quite challenging, as is commonly understood. However, if you believe residential landlords are difficult, they pale in comparison to commercial landlords. Landlords who manage commercial properties are some of the most ruthless and unpleasant individuals I have ever encountered. This tale of retribution involves a commercial landlord and how I addressed the situation with him. In the 1990s, I occasionally went for lunch at a restaurant located in the basement of our building. This place was known as the Vault, due to the presence of a massive bank vault that had been there since long before the building was converted into a restaurant. The vault was so large that it could accommodate a couple of tables, allowing diners to enjoy a meal surrounded by rows of old, gleaming safe deposit boxes. One day, while I was there for lunch, the owner pulled me aside. "The landlord is really getting under my skin," he expressed. "The landlord drives everyone crazy," I said. I was sharing office space as a subtenant in the same building with an older lawyer named Aaron, and the landlord was constantly causing us trouble. I had already experienced a few confrontations with him, and we could not stand each other right from the start. In most areas, commercial landlords do not require court orders to evict tenants who are late with rent payments. Instead, they can simply change the locks, leaving tenants to discover they are locked out when their key no longer works. Our landlord was notorious for this tactic, frequently threatening to change the locks whenever he had a disagreement with anyone, which happened quite often. "He keeps demanding all these extra rent charges," the owner of the vault said, "and it's odd because a lot of it is really outdated." The restaurant owner showed me a letter the landlord had given him earlier that day. I examined the demand and saw a list of expenses for snow removal, parking lot repair, common area flooring, and a bunch of other items going back several years. I read through to the end, and there it was, the familiar clause warning that he would change the locks if the tenant didn't comply with the terms. From the way the demand is written, it appears you've been in conflict for some time. What took you so long to consult with a lawyer? I consulted one of the lawyers I know, and he said it's hopeless, he told me. The lawyer he mentioned was someone I was familiar with, a person who had struggled in his real estate practice and had resorted to taking small legal aid cases to stay afloat when the market crashed in 1989. "Did you do something to make the landlord despise you?" I asked. "This situation seems extreme, even for our notorious landlord. He is aware that I'm planning to relocate the restaurant, and I believe he's attempting to extract as much money as possible before I leave. Additionally, he's giving me trouble regarding the vault. Is he not allowing you to take it along?" "Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons, and I don't need it. But the lease requires me to remove it and also restore the building to its original state before the vault was installed. Doing that would be extremely expensive. The unreasonable landlord says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he will take legal action against me." "Send your lease up to my office and let me review it," I said. I completed my lunch, and when I returned to my office, the lease was already waiting for me. It was just as problematic as the restaurant owner had described. The lease was a renewal of a renewal from an assigned renewal, with the original documents dating back to shortly after World War II, when a bank initially leased the space and installed the vault. Somehow, the landlord had managed to persuade the restaurant into accepting a lease that held them responsible for removing a bank vault at the end of the lease term. No major issue, I thought. The restaurant could default, and the only option for the landlord would be to take legal action against a shell company. However, as I reached the last page of the lease, I noticed a guarantee clause. The restaurant owner had personally guaranteed the lease, which meant he was responsible for removing a vault weighing 100 tons and restoring the place to its original condition. It would be an extremely costly endeavor. The situation seemed without hope. That much was clear from the start. Yet, as I reflected on the unpleasant landlord, with all his demands, threats, and rent increases, I asked my mind to work a bit of magic, and it swiftly complied. I picked up the phone and reached out to the restaurant owner. "I'm really in deep trouble, aren't I?" he said. "You're calling to tell me there's no escape. That's what my commercial lawyer already mentioned, but I figured it couldn't hurt to ask. I can rescue you from this situation, but it's going to come with a price." "How much money are we talking about?" $5,000 in legal fees and another $1,000 for the real estate agent." "Agent? What kind of agent are you referring to?" "Real estate. Send up a certified check and leave everything else to me." The check arrived on my desk in less than an hour. I headed over to Aaron's office and said, "I need a real estate agent." "Are you purchasing a house?" "Nope. Are you selling a house?" Nope. By this point, I had been sharing space with Aaron for nearly 5 years, and he understood me quite well. Are you pulling one of your stunts again? He asked. Yup, but nothing that will land you in any kind of trouble. I'm acquainted with someone, he mentioned. Aaron was acquainted with all sorts of individuals, which partly contributed to him eventually being disbarred. Nonetheless, he knew someone suitable and provided me with the agent's contact details. The following day, I visited the agent, explained my requirements, and we reached an agreement. I handed over some documents along with the payment for his fee. A few days later, I returned to the vault for lunch. The owner noticed me enter and welcomed me personally. The landlord is here, he mentioned. Why? For lunch, and to be a jerk. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face. He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. We're issuing a strong demand to the landlord, I said, as I took a bite of the flawless carbonara. What exactly are we asking for? I retrieved a document from my briefcase and handed it to him while I sipped my wine. We're insisting that the difficult landlord release all the restaurant equipment and fixtures. This includes the ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything necessary to operate a restaurant. The lease excludes all of that equipment, the restaurant owner explained to me. The landlord can't prevent me from taking whatever I want. The only issue is the vault, and naturally, I don't want it. I shook my head. You need the vault, I said, and we're insisting that he allows you to remove the bank vault as well. We're demanding he lets you take it out within 7 business days. Do you really believe you can outsmart the landlord using reverse psychology like he's a toddler? Do you think you can persuade him to act according to your plan? We'll discover the outcome soon. He has been in possession of the demand for a couple of days now. The restaurant owner accidentally dropped his wine glass, which shattered on the marble floor. You already gave it to him? He asked in surprise. He stood up, opened the vault door, and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. Let's see what the landlord has to say, I suggested, and we approached the landlord's table. The landlord was a large, stocky man with a hearty appetite. He sat by himself, energetically devouring a rack of lamb using his hands. My client requires a response today, I said. The landlord glanced up at me, chewing loudly. I'm representing the vault, I added. I issued a demand a few days ago. My client needs an immediate answer because he plans to use the vault at a new location and needs to organize accordingly. Your client can forget about the bank vault, he said, wiping his large, greasy hands on an already dirty napkin. But you can't do that, I said, feigning shock. The restaurant owner's jaw genuinely dropped. The landlord chuckled at us. I'm the landlord. I have the power to make decisions as I please. I will require that in writing, as my client may consider legal action, I said. Sue as much as you wish, the landlord told me. Sue until you're exhausted. He mentioned that I would receive a formal response by the end of the day and then asked me to leave so he could finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord, asserting ownership of the bank vault, I took it downstairs and showed it to my client. How on earth did you manage that? That's a trade secret, I said. The next month, the restaurant relocated, leaving the original space vacant, which was unfortunate since I had always enjoyed dining at the vault. The restaurant reopened in a new location 20 minutes away, still called The Vault, maintaining the ambiance of the old place. It was quite similar, except for one thing. The massive bank vault, weighing 100 tons, remained in the basement of the building where I worked. Not long after I arrived at work, and Aaron stopped me. The landlord is searching for you, Aaron said. Oh really? Regarding what? He's really upset. He mentioned that his agreement fell apart. Deal? He was planning to lease out the downstairs area to a new tenant, either a bank or a credit union. The agreement was that they would come in to finalize the lease, but they never showed up. And what does that have to do with me? I asked Aaron, and I repeated the same question to the landlord when he managed to find me a few days later. I know it was you behind all this, he said, his jowls quivering. I'm certain it was you. That proposal from the real estate agent was completely fabricated. It was just a ploy to make me retain the vault so your client could vacate the premises and leave that massive bank vault behind. I'm going to take legal action. If you're seeking legal representation, I believe I'll need to state a conflict of interest. I'm going to take legal action against the restaurant, that agent, and you, he said as he stormed off. However, the landlord chose not to pursue any legal action. Naturally, he didn't. He lacked any binding contract to base a lawsuit on, having only a vague letter of intent that I had crafted. This was just enough to entice an avaricious landlord accustomed to getting his own way. The proposal he had received was non-binding and could not be accepted without the execution of a formal lease, which of course was never finalized. When I moved out of Aaron's place a year later, the downstairs space remained empty, with a forlorn for rent sign in the window, growing noticeably faded over time. Who? Now that's a masterclass in pro-revenge. It's absolutely wild how a smart lawyer can turn the tables on a sleazy landlord like that. I mean, who would have thought a bank vault could end up being the key, pun intended, to flipping the script on a greedy landlord? The subtle genius of using reverse psychology to outmaneuver someone who's used to throwing their weight around is not just clever, it's downright poetic. But honestly, it raises a question. How many of us have faced similar challenges with landlords trying to squeeze every last dime? Share your stories of landlord encounters or pro-revenge tales below. I'd love to hear how you've navigated these crazy situations. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Voiced. If you enjoyed daily, high-quality stories, please like and subscribe to show your support.